Welcome to the Vital Mentality Podcast. I'm your host, Angel Monroe, and we're talking all things health and wellness and looking at ways to live a vital life. Short disclaimer, this is not intended as medical advice. This is just for general purposes only. So today we're looking at perimenopause and menopause, and we're looking at ways to move through this really normal, necessary transition as smoothly as possible. So perimenopause, it generally happens between 40 and 55. Perimenopause is the juicy bit, all that bit that's in between, that lasts for about 2 to 10 years. And then menopause is just classified as not having a period for 12 months, and then a couple of months after that, you can say that you've gone through menopause. But yeah, the juicy bit where you go through all the stuff is in perimenopause, and often thought of as just kind of hot flushes or flashes, depending where you are, mood swings, and some irregular periods. There's actually a lot more that can go on, and it really depends on the individual and where they are in their life on what these other symptoms can be. Some of the other symptoms can be like insomnia and sleep disturbances, tinnitus, digestive issues, allergies, extreme tiredness, migraines, headaches, breast tenderness, all kinds of mood changes like anxiety, body dysmorphia. What am I missing? Oh, muscular aches and pains, tendinitis, altered spatial awareness, so you can become more accident prone. Gum disease, you can have hair changes. I don't know if I said heart palpitations before, but yeah, anyway, you get the gist. Might have missed a couple, but it can be really varying for women. Some women are going to have a really rough time. Others, that might be on and off, or might be just more annoying, and some might not feel anything at all. Someone once said, I can't remember what their name is, so I can't quote them, but that menopause is a report card of how much self-care you've given yourself. And I think that there is a lot of truth in that. What you are not looking at and what you are kind of neglecting in yourself, whether this is on an emotional, spiritual, or physical level, I think perimenopause will show up for you. If you are in a bad relationship, you will lose tolerance to be able to stay in that relationship. If you have been drinking too much, then your body will lose the tolerance to do that. If you have not been sleeping enough, that's going to show up. You get the picture. It becomes really obvious. And I think that it is perimenopause. It's not a disease. It's not something that needs to be treated. It needs to be supported. And there's a real difference between that. And it's an opportunity for a woman to get their ducks in a row, to finally stop after putting, so much output all the time, to stop and work out what her body needs and what her emotional body and what her physical body needs to take her through these next decades. And it's actually a really beautiful opportunity to do that. There's a really beautiful quote that I read. It was from a book called The Woman's Herbal by Anne McIntyre. I'm going to read it out because it's really good. After years of caring for others, perhaps even to the extent of neglecting herself, it may be well time for a woman to care for her own needs, both physical and spiritual, and to allow time for herself. Perfect. You might have heard other people say, which I agree with, it's also a real gives you a look at the state of your adrenals and how much you've cared for your adrenals, your adrenal glands. And the adrenal glands are really susceptible to that burning the candle at both ends kind of existence. And the adrenals regulate all hormones. So that's why if you've been neglecting yourself, burning the candle at both ends, you're more likely to feel it, more likely to feel perimenopause and menopause. So the common treatment for perimenopause and menopause is that estrogen and progesterone is declining, so to give more of those things. This is done in Western medicine, Western allopathic medicine through HRT, and even sometimes in natural medicine, people will say to have phytoestrogens, which are so food sources of estrogen that have estrogen mimicking like behavior. So like alfalfa and soy and flax, things like that. Or what is that? Oh, it's going to come to me. There's another herb that people will take that mimics progesterone. It's annoying. It'll come anyway. So, but my point is, do we actually need to cover it up with extra progesterone and estrogen, or do we just need to support this change? And are there other things that we can do to kind of make this change go smoother? So I spoke about some common HRT, so hormone replacement therapy drugs, in my last podcast, who is responsible for your health. And there are lots of side effects. Some people downplay the side effects, but they're side effects nonetheless. Because I went through them last week, I won't go over it too much, maybe just a couple of things. So you can get all of the symptoms that I mentioned that you can get from perimenopause, you can still get from this drug as a side effect. There is also a risk of heart attack, endometrial and breast cancer, and changes in memory and cognition. So the other thing is one of the reasons, and I've even heard a naturopath recently saying that HRT was a good idea because when a woman gets out of menopause, the risk of heart disease and osteoporosis goes up. So people think that estrogen has a protective mechanism to it, which could be true, but I think there's some other things going on I'll get to in a second. But the thing is that the idea is that HRT can be protective against osteoporosis, but as soon as you get off it, the likelihood of osteoporosis goes up even more than if you'd taken it before. So personally, I just don't think that it's a good idea to do. Each to their own, but the body, in my opinion, is brilliant and it needs to go through the changes that it needs to go through. And there's no risk to naturally going through perimenopause. And there are lots of ways that you can make it easier on yourself without having to do that. To me, if there's a risk of death, i.e. via cancer, which there is in this, it's a non-negotiable for me. So what else? What else can we look at? Chinese medicine, they say that the liver controls storing and regulating blood volume and has a huge effect on menstruation and menopause. And there's lots of symptoms in perimenopause that from a Chinese medicine perspective is liver, like whether it's like liver stagnation or too much heat or whatever. But being tired, being grumpy, being hot, having allergies, headaches, these are all symptoms in perimenopause, all symptoms of liver stagnation. In Western medicine, the liver detoxifies, and it's become obvious that the menstrual cycle is an avenue for detoxification. In menstrual blood, they've found PFAS, which are industrial forever chemicals, which can be found in food packaging, non-stick cookware, certain textiles. Because it's so widely used, it's also found in drinking water, in groundwater, and from industrial runoff, basically. So not only that, but other xenoestrogens, which are chemicals that mimic estrogen, they've been found in menstrual blood. So has microplastics. So it's super interesting. Like, if you look at it from a terrain perspective, say we just look at hot flushes. When your menstrual cycle is beginning to end and you're reducing one pathway for detoxification in the body's brilliance, it finds another way to detox. And sweating is an avenue for getting rid of these toxins. It's also known in the scientific literature that environmental toxins are associated with worse menopausal outcomes. And so are EMFs, electromagnetic frequencies. I did a whole podcast on that a couple of weeks ago. So listen on ways to reduce your exposure to those. So I think that is a really important picture. The other part that I'll say before I get into that is that all of these chemicals that I mentioned before are associated with cardiovascular disease and with osteoporosis. They are the two things that are meant to increase in risk after you finish menopause, so postmenopausal. And like I said, we've lost a detoxification route through menopause. So is it that? So everyone usually says that those things occur for women after menopause because of the drop in estrogen, but it's very obvious that that's not necessarily the case, at least not all of the time, that our environmental exposure to toxins is a factor. So I think that's such an interesting piece of the puzzle. So rather than trying to replace estrogen, replace progesterone, wild yams is the thing that I was thinking of before, for progesterone as a natural source. Instead of trying to replace those things, if we support the liver, we are going to be much, much better off. And it's not just toxins. The liver is really susceptible to, like I was saying before, how well we look after ourselves. And if we are constantly looking after other people and not caring for ourselves, a certain amount of anger and resentment builds up in the body. And the liver in Chinese medicine also is associated with anger and resentment. So, paints a pretty interesting picture. And just to kind of finish that off, PFAS those chemicals were widely used since the 50s. Concern for those started in the early 2000s, and the conversation around perimenopause, it gained traction in the 80s. And before that, it wasn't spoken about. Now, was that because we weren't paying attention to women, or was it because it wasn't an issue? Because you look at women who live in remote traditional cultures, they're not having the same problems. So I think that our environment has a lot to answer for. So what am I moving on to? Now we're going to talk about solutions. And I think a supported nervous system, it really needs daily routine. It needs regularity in nourishment. And what that is going to be so different from person to person. I'm in that stage of my life too. I'm 46, nearly 47. I have an adult child with 2 children, and so I'm a grandparent, and I've still got a teenager at home, and I have a husband at home who's helps out a lot. I've got a growing business, so there's lots of different areas where I'm pulled. Some women may not have kids, they might have elderly parents that they're looking after in a demanding job. You may have a baby at home. And so all of these things I talk about in solutions, it's you're not going to be, not everyone's going to be able to do them, but I guess the point is you hit as many of them as you can. And if you say you've got a baby and you can't have 8 to 10 hours of sleep, then you'll try and hit all these other notes, and then you might get a nap in. Like, we have to be flexible depending on what our life is like on how we're going to approach this. But what I'm trying to do by explaining all of these things is to help everyone gain awareness around what they need, and then you just do your best. That's all you can ever do. So yeah, at least, like I said, the nervous system needs regularity, and it really gains its nourishment from that. So doing something every day to look after yourself. I like to, when I wake up, to get morning light. The morning light not coming through a window, actually outside, even if you crack a window, or if you're in your car early in the morning, you crack your sunroof or your window, or a door. I like to go outside as soon as I wake up with a cup of tea, herbal tea to start, and just get that morning light, because that regulates all your hormones. It's the morning light stimulates pregnenolone, which is the master hormone for all your other hormones. So it's really important, if you want to have like normal hormonal function, that you get some morning light. And I usually do that with a herbal tea, because your cortisol rises naturally with the sun when your eyes have direct contact with the sun. And so I do drink coffee, but I let that happen before I go near coffee. So give it usually an hour. So usually I'll just give you my morning routine if that's of any interest to anyone. So go outside, have the herbal tea, or crack a door if I don't go outside for whatever reason. Exercise in the morning. I like to exercise outside, because it means that I get sun exposure and I get a chance to do grounding. That's also a non-negotiable for me. So bare feet on the ground, on the grass or the sand. And then once I finished all of that, I have a nutrient-dense breakfast, usually including eggs and veg, or eggs and fruit, and then I start my day. So yeah, it's really important to set something up. You may not be able to do something in the morning, so you may set something up in the evening, but yeah, something in the day that kind of gets your nervous system feeling like it's supported. In terms of chemicals, it's really important to, if you don't already try and lead a low tox life, it's really important to start integrating that. And you don't need to do everything at once. You can just start. You might start by eating organic food if you don't already. And then next time you buy makeup, you might make sure that you buy the low toxic makeup. You might start changing your workout wear to natural fibers. But yeah, whatever it is, start one thing at a time if you haven't started already. But looking at cookware, cleaning products, makeup, clothing, your drinking water. Yeah. What you can do to support detox is castor oil packs over the liver, I think, is the best way to do it. A couple of times a week is great if you can. Epsom salt baths, so that's magnesium baths. Being rich in minerals generally, like making sure that you're getting it through the diet, and other means like Epsom salt baths. The more mineral rich your life is, the better you are at getting rid of heavy metals. Bentonite, clay, and charcoal are really good to bath in as well for getting rid of toxins. And sauna is so sweating is another great way. So it's, I think in that period, it's a super important practice to engage in some kind of detoxification ritual every week. Sleeping, like I said, sometimes this is going to be a tricky one. If you're having sleep problems, you definitely need to be addressed. But if you can, you should be sleeping from about 10 to 6. That's going to be much better than sleeping from 2 to 10, because biologically, there's a whole lot of hormonal and circadian things that happen before 2 a.m. So you need, even 9, going to bed at 9:30. So you're like really asleep by 10. And that's the minimum. I mean, I'm finding that I'm even needing more sleep. Last night it was 9 till 7:30. So and you may not be able to do that every night, but that's the goal. And like I said, it regulates all your hormones, so cortisol, melatonin, leptin, your growth hormones, so for muscle repair and fat loss, and for skin health. And also your circadian rhythm regulates your gut and your thyroid health. So it's super important, sleep. And if you do shift work or you got babies, then just doing your best to get that, even if it's sometimes, and taking naps and making sure that you're ticking the boxes in all these other areas that I mentioned is the best way to support yourself as much as you can. Diet, one of the worst diets that you could possibly do, I think, would be a low-fat diet. And when I'm talking about fats, good fats, I'm saying olive oil, coconut oil, eggs, butter, cheese, and other animal fats. Low-fat diets, low-fat, high protein wreaks absolute havoc on your hormones. I think women should definitely be having lots of protein. I think when we start counting how many grams, it just ends up in neurosis. But generally making sure that we have some protein in each meal is a good way to go. Reducing grains and sugar is really can be pretty necessary for most women. Our ability to process a lot of carbohydrates diminishes. And I'm not talking about vegetables and fruit, but definitely when I'm talking about carbohydrates, but definitely grains gets a little bit harder, and refined grains especially. I would have, personally, I like to, breakfast is like eggs and veg, eggs and fruit, and then whatever for dinner. During the week, it's always whole grains, and then I might have some refined grains on the weekend. So it's not about eliminating anything, but just shifting the focus a little bit. So so good fats, fruits and vegetables, and protein are front and center in the diet. And some medicinal foods that I'd include would be bone broth, raw sauerkraut, and kimchi. So things that are not on the shelf, they should be in the fridge. Yogurt, anything that kind of helps to heal the gut, and things for the liver like dandelion tea, coriander, leafy greens, that kind of thing. And anything with lots of minerals in it. So just basically a good whole food diet. And if you really wanted to amp that up a bit, you'd be looking at things like liver and oysters, butter, that kind of thing. Not butter for the mineral boosters, but just lots of good fruit and veg. And what you want to reduce is seed oils and like I said, refined carbs and sugar. Alcohol, don't think it needs to be taken out completely, but it really does need to be reduced a lot. Caffeine as well. You can still drink coffee, but like I said, I think lots of people hear a lot of health people saying you shouldn't have it on an empty stomach. And I think for some people that's true, but I think it's possible to have it on an empty stomach as long as you're not doing it as soon as you wake up. As long as you've given your body a chance to get the natural light and to have that natural rise of cortisol without like going in with caffeine to rise the cortisol straight away, then that's not a good idea. But generally with food is better for sure. The other thing, like I think I've said this over and over again, you have to look at your emotional health. If the worst thing for perimenopause is stress. So this stage of your life is really asking you to look at your relationships, look at your relationship with yourself, look at your relationship with the people around you, with your work, like every area. Are you being fulfilled? And if you take care to look after yourself in that way, you're going to be much better off in this time. Exercise is super important. If you're not exercising every day, one way or another, I think it's going to show up. I don't mean hitting the gym 7 days a week, although weights I think are pretty important for women because the more muscle, if we need a certain amount of muscle to take us through this time, otherwise we're going to have way more issues. Fat stores toxins, and also too much can mimic estrogen, so we end up with our hormones all over the place. So yeah, some kind of weights a couple of times a week. I'm saying every day, but one of those days might just be a walk. You might do a couple of days of yoga. Like it should be varied in intensity. So a couple of days intense, a couple of days mid-range, and then you might have 1 or 2 days it's just a walk or a light swim or something like that, or a yin yoga, but something where you've moved your body every day. I generally don't think that people should be taking herbs and supplements all the time, but in this time that can be super, super useful. I personally love Fem21. It's on my website. It's actually good for women to regulate their menstrual cycle, support their liver and support their gut through any stage. My teenage daughter takes it, I take it, and when I don't take it, I notice it. It's food. It's a food level kind of the herbs that are in it. And so if you're having really kind of quite severe problems, it might not be enough. You might need like some stronger herbal formulations, but if it's just like a little bit up and down, then Fem21's unreal. Like I said before, you need to be mineralized. I really like the zinc supplement that I've got on the store that's just from oysters, or the beef liver supplements. If you were having more urinary problems, you might take the beef and kidney supplements. If you were having more cardiovascular symptoms, you might take the beef and heart supplement. Cod liver oil, super essential for good fats and omega-3s. And I also love the magnesium spray, really good for the nervous system and for metabolism and just regulating the menstrual cycle in general. So if you need more help, there's more going on than what we've covered here, please come and book an appointment with me and just, be super gentle with yourself. It's, a massive time of transition, and it's a time for you to come first. So I hope you have found, and before I finish, tell your husband, your kids, whoever, um, if you're watching this and you're going through perimenopause, or your 30-year-old friends, I think this is really important information that everyone needs to know, because no one should be going through a major transition like this on their own. I hope this has been helpful, and I'll see you next time.